Friends, let me introduce myself. I'm Anand Prakash. I taught English literature in Delhi University for more than 4 decades. I also, meanwhile, wrote books on literature, mainly on literary and critical theory. And additionally, I also worked on Hindi fiction and have written papers and presented those papers in the seminars, as well as written essays on Premchand. Hence my presence here as a speaker on Premchand. In the previous lecture, I talked about Premchand. I just giving a few important but simple details, and the lecture was titled Premchand Introduction, where I made some kind of a background to discuss certain works that he wrote. And today I'll take up Premchand's novels. In the previous lecture, I talked about the beginning of the novel in Hindi, and more or less in the precise sense, Premchand begins the novel genre in Hindi. There are, of course, novels written by others in the 1880s, 1890s, and later, but then the way we understand the novel today, the modern novel, the novel which is connected with certain social forces, certain phenomena, that is in the association of Premchand's writing itself. What is a novel? How is it different from other tales and chronological accounts of things earlier, where fiction and reality combine, is an issue that we discuss generally in the theory of the novel. And so far as the theory of the novel with respect to India is concerned, let me share this with you very clearly, that the novel begins with the Indian national movement. Maybe the Indian national movement requires some writers to come forward and talk to the ordinary reader all over the country. Ordinary reader, the educated reader who has been to school at least, who can read and who can visualize. The novel is meant for this person. And the national movement essentially, not very consciously, but essentially, it required some kind of an understanding of a new perspective. For instance, India would not have been the kind of nation it became in the 20th century. And as it started, moving towards nationalism, moving towards, a new kind of formation, where, India would be considered not a watan, not a place of birth, not a place of origin, but a country. And country you might not have seen all over. Maybe you are a bit aware of where you are placed and how you relate to that place, plus other places which you have not seen, but which are also contiguous to the one where you live, and so on and so forth. So the larger chunk of the geographical boundaries and that are extended to other areas. All those together, this comes through history also. There are certain associations of language, culture, etc. All that potentially constitute the nation, but potentially. So what makes one a nation is a question that I cannot easily answer. But then in India's case, what happened was that when a foreign power came here, started affecting its economic life, its political life, started controlling the resources, started bureaucratically administering the system and society. These were the foreigners. They were born and brought up elsewhere. They had value systems of another country, and they came here basically to take advantage of India's resources. And these people temporarily settled here, and they started ruling the country. And this process would have begun sometime in the 18th century, but in the 19th century, particularly in the wake of 1857, that particular revolt, which was called by the Britishers themselves mutiny, but Indians preferred to call it a national, movement and some kind of a, war of independence, something like that. So it's a way of looking at things, and War of Independence, well, is a big word, and it became a kind of symbol of independence in the middle of the 19th century. But then when the process began of fighting an enemy who had come from outside to exploit our resources, that process continued for a long time. So from 1857 to 1947, these 90 years, it is these that literally belong to the rise and evolution and growth of the national movement. And this movement would have its political dimension, it would have its economic dimension. These are the main dimensions, because rulers would like to use our resources, and they would like to also capture our minds and bureaucracy particularly. Therefore, they ruled the country economically and politically. But when India rose at the level of grassroots against a foreign power, because they were directly influenced by, affected by the developments of these 90 years, then the educated middle class that was forming itself into a kind of cohesive group, then they started thinking of ideas that would suit the Indian national movement. And friends, that when you need ideas, you create them. You just approach people who can think better, who have the time to think better. So when they think, then they create ideas. And some people create ideas not by sitting in the library or moving around and talking to people, but they create ideas by visualizing, by imagining, by fantasizing, by writing stories. And stories not in the traditional sense where they are meant for entertainment, but stories which will somehow carry a different kind of message. And this became necessary, particularly in the last years of the 19th century and in the first few years of the 20th century, that people should come forward and they should write. Then the second thing is that when they write, what kind of writing should it be? A novel believes in prose. Prose means the way you speak. You utter sentences, I communicate. And this is the simplest method. All human beings use prose, to communicate themselves. The literate ones, the illiterate ones, when they are informal, when they sit at home, when they exchange greetings and other things with the neighbors and with the people whom they don't know, when they seek information, etc., then the simplest thing that happens to human communication is that prose is used. So novel then thought, the novelists who were working for the writing of the novel, they thought that perhaps the true medium of a novel would be the use of prose. The prose would be the medium, and therefore this prose became a kind of reigning kind of a form in the later part of the 19th century. People started talking, and people started writing as they talked, the same way as they talked. They used the same rhythms. And if you, of course, the stories earlier would also have been told like this, but most extant stories, those which exist, they are in the form of verse. You have the story of Ram and Sita, and that is called Ramcharitmanas. Now it's a simple tale, it's popular all over India, and this was written in the later medieval period, but then that is written in verse. And the verse is very close to prose, but it's verse all the same. And it's very difficult to write in the modern sense a verse in which an account of simple things is presented for the benefit of the reader. Now the third thing I say about the factors that caused the writing of the novel is that old stories, whether it's Ram or Sita or princes and princesses or even legends, etc., they generally did not talk about the ordinary happenings in life. They always had some kind of a big moral. Of course, in the case of Ram and Sita, it's the story of a king and his queen, and how the king should rule and how he should relate to the masses, and he should be like their father, like their protector. He should always be guided by the aspirations and notions of morality, etc., of the people he is supposed to rule, and all those things. So it's a big subject. But in the latter half of the 19th century, when people thought of writing tales and stories in prose, in ordinary prose, then they thought that perhaps those old stories will not do. Old stories with the old kind of message, where somewhere figure of God would appear, or figure of some kind of gods would appear, or goodness would be would be curbing evil and all those messages. Then one would not be talking about the real problems. One will be talking about the moral issues, moral problems, etc. And therefore, a new kind of content was required, and this content was that people would write stories about their own life. They will not take much from the earlier stories. Some folk tales might be used, but when they were retold, then also what will happen is that people will tell them, bringing them closer to the context of life. Therefore, this kind of a writing was done then, and this writing had to be used in a different sense. Then the other factor that also influenced the writing of prose of the novel at that time was that this kind of a tradition of writing a novel was available in the Western world. And because we had the Western ruler here with us, and these people came in lakhs here, thousands and lakhs, and they also carried their culture, and we came to know by exchanging things with them. We also came to know about the features of literature that these people in their own country had evolved over a period of time, and we came to know that the novel existed in a very developed form in England, in other countries of Europe. So those who knew English in the 19th century and later, these people would know that there is a kind of tradition of writing the novels there. So the educated sections in India at that time would have imbibed certain values from and certain ideas and notions from the Western novel. So these things combined, and Premchand is there at that time, in the history of India, when English ideas are available, ideas of politics are available, ideas about economics are available, the national needs and how they should be articulated, and what kind of a courage and other things are needed. They are there in the air. Then Premchand has this advantage, and he starts thinking of writing a novel. And I talked about the specific novels that Premchand wrote from 1900 onwards up to 1920, and these novels were distinct in their shape, and that shape was that ordinary life and ordinary situations would be discussed, and that Premchand would be talking about some kind of a social reform. He would be making the readers think about the issues that they confront, the issues that they go into, the issues that they are supposed to resolve. They may be able to resolve them, they may not be able to resolve them, but they at least know that there is a challenge, and that challenge is to be met. So this is how, this is the kind of atmosphere in which Premchand starts writing. And the early novels are very close to the 19th century tradition. They have a moral at the end. They have ideal or idealized characters there. The characters are educated, or they are getting education. They are young. They have certain principles to pursue, and they talk in a very elegant language. They think very high. They dream about life, and Premchand, of course, takes pleasure out of this. I'm struck by one particular thing in the case of the novel. Novels are written basically for entertainment. When you have the time to sit back and relax, then you read a story, and then you start enjoying it in your mind. The story starts working in your mind. Certain things that you have been thinking should be known, they are presented by the writer. And sometimes, for instance, the human being would like to, think about beauty, think about, love, etc. in life. That love may not be available in life easily. Of course, it's a very orthodox society. In India, there is no place of love at that time, except in the fables, etc. And therefore, people want to imagine as to what love is, and how, this love can really be a satisfactory factor in at least at the level of imagination. So Premchand also exploited in the early writings some of these situations, love situations, where young people would aspire to be next to, if it's a woman, then a male, and if it's a male, then a woman, and then they will communicate very softly in their minds with each other. So this kind of a thing is there in the earlier novels, and Premchand is, in a way, struggling with this idea and giving it a shape. Now, it's a very subtle area in the early 20th century that people start writing love tales. Of course, love tales are available in India as since times immemorial. You know that Radha and Krishna and well, there are many other things, and the theme of love is there. But then an ordinary boy or an ordinary man thinking of love in his situations, and women are orthodox and they are not supposed to express their love directly and clearly. So it's a very tricky situation in the early 20th century, and Premchand is aware of this kind of a subtlety and trickiness. Anyway, Premchand doesn't go deeper into it. He relates it with, he combines it with the situations that the boy and the girl face, and then the family considerations come, then the culture comes, then the boy's idealism also comes, whether he should be a lover and settle down in life, or whether he has to pursue certain ideals, he has to become a breadwinner of the family, and there are all kinds of tussles between love and the true real life situation. So Premchand starts with this. Then the question of marriage comes, and marriages are a big problem in the early 20th century, and there is casteism. Maybe love doesn't bother about caste, etc. But then these things are there, and Premchand starts writing novels about these things at that time. Then comes the question of idealism at the level of society and politics. Politics, of course, Premchand would not discuss. I told you in the previous lecture that his book was banned, Soze Watan, and after that he decided that he will not touch upon political topics, even though even in Soze Watan he was not talking directly of politics, but it was seen by the authorities that he was moving towards politics and suggesting that political answers could be given to the problem existing at that point of time. So Premchand then in these novels starts with this. He at the level of imagination then gets embroiled with the social structures of society, and he's taking them up one by one. And I told you about one particular novel where he's talking of prostitution in the early 20th century, and there is a novel Seva Sadan that is written with that purpose, where he shows these young women who are supposed to sell their bodies to the people with money, etc. And he is sympathetic with them, and he knows that they are nice people, they are fine girls, they are fine women, and they have their own tastes and their own aspirations, and they are compelled to live a life of degradation. But then Premchand is thinking of making them organized, making them think about it. There are certain young men with ideals who are made to confront a woman who's in the flesh trade, and then Premchand visualizes as a writer certain situations which raise questions regarding the women who are in this profession of trade, of flesh trade. But then this is a kind of reformism, and it's there. Perhaps women can be freed from the clutches of such social structures if they are given education, if they are made for instance economically independent. Premchand thinks about these ideas, and then he thinks of sending young girls to schools so that they can get a job, etc. And through education, women would learn the idea of dignity, and then they would be able to realize themselves. So it's a kind of a reformist writing that Premchand is doing till more or less 1920. And then, as I said earlier, he starts becoming more and more curious about the plight of the peasantry. And there, I discussed the question of peasants, and that novel that I talked about, and it's a major novel, Premashram. This novel is written for the purpose of studying, in a way. I'm saying studying in the case of a novel. It's a novel of a different kind. Studying the situations, the actual concrete situations that peasantry finds itself in. And there, the answer for Premchand then, and of course Premchand is getting inspiration from world literature. He's getting ideas from situations, from happenings, that are there at the world level. For instance, when Premchand is writing in the 1920s, Russia already has become a socialist country. USSR is there, for instance. Lenin is alive. Lenin's words are quoted by intellectuals the world over. Premchand knows about it, and therefore, when peasant organization is visualized by Premchand in some kind of a form, then you can see that Soviet Russia and the socialist movements elsewhere, whether they succeed or fail, that's not important. The important thing is that they are actively there. So Premchand would be able to visualize in his own country, in India. The peasantry coming together, studying, creating productivity, increasing productivity, and organizing things in such a manner that peasants produce, peasants' labor remains within the bounds of his own control, and landlords would be always kept away in the imagination of Premchand, and this is how things will carry on for some time in the novel. So Premashram that way is a major novel by Premchand in terms of describing the situation of the peasantry. Now after that comes a period when Premchand thinks of extending the scope of the peasant paradigm to politics, and therefore he starts thinking of a role for the peasantry in society as a whole, and for that he writes a novel which is one of the best that is available in Hindi literature, and it vies for honor with the writing elsewhere in the country, and this novel is Rangbhumi. And this Rangbhumi is written, he starts writing in 1922, he finishes in 1924, and he has written this novel both in English and both in Urdu and Hindi. It's first written in Urdu, but it's first published in Hindi. And the important thing about this novel is that it's called a Rangbhumi. In Urdu, the title was Chaugane Hasti, and in Hindi it became Rangbhumi. These days it's available in English translation also, and the Penguin edition of Rangbhumi is called Playground. So what is a playground? What is a Rangbhumi? And Premchand visualizes that this world is a Rangbhumi. This world is a playground, and there is a Rangbhumi means theatre, where theatre is produced. So this world is a theatre. So who knows, maybe he is also thinking of the world being a stage, and that famous poem which is there in As You Like It by Shakespeare, you have a line, the world is a stage and we are all actors. So maybe Premchand was also visualizing that the society in which we live is some kind of a stage meant for actors to act in and to play a role. And see the politics of it. If Indians in the 1920s are thinking of the country as a playground or as a stage, and thinking of themselves as actors, people who will play the role in Rangbhumi. And if it's you see the translation, the English translation where the word playground is used, that it's a playground in which the people, the participants will play. And play what? They'll play a role. If it's a football game, if it's a cricket game, the batsman, all those things. So see the metaphor. So and it's an idea. Premchand may be indirectly giving the idea to the masses that they have to play a role. They don't have to remain satisfied with whatever they have, and they should not bother only about their individual requirements and needs, but they should play a role. Play a role for whom? Not for oneself. One doesn't play a role for oneself. One always plays a role for the benefit of the audience, for the benefit of others in society. And therefore, one starts thinking of this very important concept of playing a role. Now, I can ask myself the question today, do I have to play a role? Should I play a role? As a teacher, I always played a role. I talked to the students. I raised questions. I made them speak. They asked difficult questions from me, and I started pondering on those questions in detail. I learned from them, they learned from me, and this kind of a play continued till I retired as a teacher. Today also, for instance, I am playing a role in the sense that I talk about Premchand, and you are listening viewers, and it might be also somewhat useful for you that you are playing a role of contending with certain ideas which you are hearing in this form, perhaps for the first time, and therefore all of us are playing a role. But in the early 20th century, when you think of playing a role, then straight away you think of playing a role in the context of British colonialism and British imperialism. So the very title is very tricky. The title is very, very interesting. And Premchand is writing this Rangbhumi in order to perhaps convey this idea. And then you see the expanse of the novel, the vastness of the novel. The novel goes in different editions, from 800 pages to 1200 pages. It's a big novel. Initially, and in some editions, it was there in 2 volumes. And so one volume and then the second volume, Pehla Bhag and Dusra Bhag. and what is there in the novel. And you realize that it's a place, that Premchand has captured is a place that is somewhere between the city and the village. And this is a very important place in India, and Premchand has chosen it very well. And the city expands. The city is where the action is. The village, is at the mercy of the city. The village is controlled by the city, and the village has villagers who own the land, and the city people, they now want to make a different use of the land. They don't want land to remain just for producing crops, but for certain other purposes. So maybe the city people are planning to industrialize, to bring in industry, to set up machines there, and to turn the Indian population from peasants to workers. Maybe that is the case. And of course, this is what is exactly happening in India at that time. There's more and more of industrialization is happening in the country, and that way Premchand has taken up a question that is very close to the reality of the time. And there is a man called John Sevak. He's a new industrialist. He wants land, and he wants to take land with the help of the government, with the help of the bureaucracy, and with the power of money, etc. And he will establish an industry. Now, is industry good or bad for the country? Is the question that Premchand would be raising in the novel. And one realizes that unless the peasants' needs are kept in mind, unless industry is supposed to address the difficulties of the society in general, industry can be harmful. Industry will grab the land, take away the land. The people with land, small tracts of land, they will be rendered landless. Whether they get the job of a worker, well, they might get the job of a worker, but the job of a worker may not be as satisfying as working on your own land. So look at it from the industrialist's point of view, and you realize that the peasants are a kind of obstruction in the way of society's progress. But then turn the other side and start looking at the peasants from the peasant point of view, and then you realize that industry is encroaching upon their rights of independence. So Premchand is bringing in this question of clash between the city on one side and the village on the other, and telling you, that in this clash, one has to take sides and one has to play a role. And Premchand would like to present the case of the peasantry there. So that's the question. And Premchand, of course, is not a sociologist. He is not a writer of history. He is writing a novel. Therefore, he brings in lots of other issues also. And one important issue which draws our attention in particular is the issue of the ordinary illiterate, suppressed, neglected kind of a person. Does this person play a role? Can this person play a role? And viewers, you would be surprised to see that the hero, the protagonist of the novel, is a blind beggar. His name is Surdas. And a blind beggar who doesn't have a home, a blind beggar who comes up in the, wakes up in the morning and goes to the road, goes to the street, and there he starts begging. But he has somehow inherited some land. And this land, the industrialist has an eye on this land, because this is at a place that it can suit the industry at that point of time. So this land is to be grabbed. Now the beggar owning the land is a very strange situation. And beggar has, what he has done is he's never bothered about his land. He just kept it for the cattle of the village to graze on. So therefore the land is a common land. He has it in his name, and but then he is very happy, that the land is being used by society. So Premchand is that way bringing in this very important question of the land being there for the common use. So this land for the common use will be taken away by an industrialist who will then set up an industry there and control it and put it in such a situation that the produce of the industry will be available only to the owner of the means of production. So this way, and what should can a beggar fight a millionaire at that point of time? A person with all kinds of contacts with bureaucracy, with the law, with all those political leaders, with money bags, bankers, etc. Can a beggar fight the might of such a person as the industrialist? This is the question. And the plot carries on. And the beggar is able to, the beggar has, qualities, because he has been begging, so he has been talking to people, he has been convincing them about parting with money and giving them money. So he knows how to convey ideas. And when he stands up to protest against the policies of the government and which is pro-industrialist, then of course he becomes a kind of a leader there. And then Premchand raises the level of the novel from that of the ordinary peasants and the ordinary beggars to such a height, that these people start representing the general cause of the masses. So this becomes a writing of the national movement itself. Towards the end, the beggar is killed, but in his killing, the people have risen in revolt, and there's clear indication that it will be very difficult for the government and for the industrialists to grab the land and establish the industry on their terms. This is where the novel ends. What kind of a novel is this? Was it heavy on the reader? Would people find it difficult to read because it was discussing serious issues? Not at all. If you ask me the question, Premchand is such a fine storyteller, and he can bring in details, he can bring humor, he can bring tragedy, he can always remind you and me about the existence of such people in actual life. So you start in fact wondering about such people in your own conditions, in your own life. Even today, the situations that he has presented in this novel, many people would be still existing in our own time, and you visualize them today also. Therefore, the novel is extremely interesting. It is so interesting and absorbing that people who have read it claim that this is one of the best novels, and once you start reading it, you have to finish it. I tell you my own experience when I read it as a young man many years ago. I was in my 20s, and I would not sleep during the day. I had the habit of having a nap, but in the days I was reading Rangabhumi, I would not sleep, and I would sleep late at night, and I'll get up early. And I finished the novel flat, I think, in 7 days or 10 days. And I wish that the novel would have continued. So this is the kind of writing that Premchand can do. He can write a novel which is so engaging, which is so absorbing, and at the same time have this very clear message of telling people that industry is good only when it meets the requirements of the masses, because industry is supposed to be cohesive and comprehensive, and it belongs to society as a whole, not to just one industrialist. All these questions of socialism, all these questions of capitalism, all the questions of politics, it is these that are being discussed in this one of the greatest novels that Premchand wrote. And it's a novel in the real sense. Well, people call it these days double decker. It's a big novel, and it's Premchand is able to create a panorama of incidents and characters, and then you realize that you are actually watching in front of you through imagination the whole of India. And India is now getting worked up towards the end. Somebody who has not harmed anyone, who was a peaceful person, this person was shot by the police when he was protesting, and then this person becomes a kind of a hero. Now, one thing very, very interesting that I would like to share with the audience is that this is exactly the time when Gandhiji is reigning supreme in the political arena in the country. And Gandhi himself, is of course not blind. Gandhi has his eyes working, but in all other respects, this blind beggar appears to be a Gandhi, a person with lathi in hand, a middle-aged person, and talking to people, talking about politics, taking a stand, mobilizing opinion. So this became a kind of a novel where Gandhi himself was the hero, and Gandhi as a common man. You remember that Gandhiji, who was a barrister at law, and who had done the highest kind of education available in the world in his own time. This person came to India, and he shed all his formal clothes, and he was there in langoti and dhoti and just a lathi in hand, and he would move around, and he was able to relate with the masses because of this reason. So Premchand is idealizing the figure of Gandhi then, and then he is able to write a novel. So would you call it a novel? Would you call it social history? Will you call it a political tract? Will you call it presenting an economic argument? And I think answer in my case, for instance, would be that it is all these and much more. It is also an interesting novel. It engages you and it compels you to think. So that's the kind of novelist that Premchand was. And here he discussed the question of the peasantry vis-a-vis industrialism in such a manner that the answer would be found in meeting the actual requirements of the masses in general and the peasants in particular. Now, this novel is published in sometime in 1925-26. It's finished in April 24, as my dates here tell me. And then, the trend begins. The trend, in fact, began with Prem, and this was the second novel. And then Premchand would keep on writing about this, because he has now got his political voice, he has got his cultural voice, he has got his ideological voice. He will talk like this. Therefore, one novel after another would be written like this, and people would wait for his novels to come to be published. And Premchand, who till now was working hard to survive and to maintain his family, he became a household name, and people started buying his novels, and he started living a life of comfort from then onwards. Then that there is the next novel that he writes. This is Kaya Kalp. And the titles that were supposed to be, these titles were considered by Premchand, and all of them were rejected for Kaya Kalp, which was finally adopted. You think of the words that Premchand had, considered: asadhya sadhana. Asadhya sadhana, something that is impossible if you can, get that. Maya swapna, illusion. That you are thinking of certain issues in your mind as if they would happen, but they would not happen because they are unreal. Or arthanad is the tragic part in life. And Kaya Kalp is it can't happen, it is unreal, it will create tragedy. And he's already written Rangabhumi, and there there is tragedy, of course, but then there is more of idealism and enthusiasm in Rangabhumi. So what has happened that the next novel is struggling with ideas about the impossible, ideas about the unreal, ideas about that which will bring in tragedy. Maybe Premchand is reading the situation more, analyzing the situation more, and then finding that it's not as easy as it might look. So it can't be, India cannot be a Prem Ashram. India cannot also be a Rangabhumi. You can't think of this as a stage where you play a role and you succeed. Things are very difficult. This is what the man is saying, and he's going deeper into the reality of life. So see how a novel can make you aware about the situation at a level where you realize that it's an uphill task to change the system, to change the society. And Premchand, that way, I would be saying that it's not as easy as he thought initially. Well, then around this time in the 1920s, he is very productive. He must be writing on a daily basis, must be writing 10, 15, 20 pages every day. And so in 1 year, 1.5 years, a novel comes, then the other novel begins, and it goes on. And this is perhaps the most productive year in the life of Premchand, the writer, from 1920 up to 1930. So, for instance, he adapts a novel from a French author. The novel is Thais, and this novel is about the transformation of a person from one kind of human being to another kind of a human being. And Premchand adapts this novel in Hindi and Urdu, and he calls it Ahankar in Hindi. And there, this novel is published in 1926. So imagine Prem Ashram, then Rangabhumi, Kaya Kalp, and along with this novel has been adapted. It's a short novel. I read it, and it's also adapted by some other people, like Bhagavate Charan Verma adapted it in the 1930s. So this novel of Anatole France, which was titled Thais, Premchand tried his hand at rewriting the novel in the Indian, putting the plot in the Indian conditions. Then he wrote that novel which I talked about in the previous lecture, Nirmala. Nirmala was serialized, and in Nirmala, Premchand exclusively focused upon the problem of women, apart from Seva Sadan, which was of course woman-centered. But then here it's an individual character who has been focused, and he's bringing about the tragedy of Nirmala. It's a very tragic novel. The moment you think of Nirmala in 1925-26 and you think of Kayakalp, which these are written more or less together, then you find that actually some kind of a tragedy is facing Premchand at the level of a writer. So he cannot now think as enthusiastically about situations as he might have started doing when he was writing novels. Then he writes another novel, Gaban, which is in 1931. It was published in 1931, which means it belongs to the 1920s. In this novel, once again, a woman's idea is taken, and this time the woman is not as tragic as she is supposed to do some soul searching. So she is led astray by the attraction of ornaments. All women, love ornaments, and in Gaban, because of the pressure of the woman who loved the ornaments, the husband took away the things from the office and he stole things from there, and he could not account for it. So therefore, the man was jailed. It was a kind of gaban that was practiced by the husband of the ornament-loving wife. A social novel, but then you see the psychology that Premchand is able to examine, and Premchand knew his characters very well. There is a kind of a charge about Premchand, that he is a sociological novelist, and he doesn't understand the finer aspects of psychology of human beings. Well, those people can be easily silenced when they refer to novels like Gaban or even Nirmala, where the inner and of course Rangabhumi, which also has a very strong psychological dimension to certain characters. So anyway, you see that in Nirmala and in Gaban, it is women's psychology that is being investigated and studied, and Premchand is now branching out into different very important and as well as subtle areas, and he is becoming greater writer with a great deal of insight by the day. Almost every day he is writing, and every day he is evolving further. Then you have Karm Bhumi. It is published in 1932. This captures also the same period, 1920s, and then finally Godan in 1936. Godan is the last and perhaps the greatest novel of Premchand. If you have to name two novels of Premchand where there is some kind of a tussle for greatness, then the two novels are Rangbhumi and Godan. Now I would I have more or less the entire consensus of Hindi with me. I realize, and viewers, you also would agree, that Godan is a class apart as a novelist. Godan is a 1920s novel written in 1936, and this is his last novel. But then here, all those themes of resolution, themes of harmony, themes of victory, themes of playing a role, the themes of tragedy, etc. All of them are presented there in a different way. Now Premchand generally is a writer of giving a message, but here is not giving a message. Here he is examining the actual situation of each character, and there is a characters galore like Rangbhumi here, and at the center of the plot are two people, the middle-aged man and woman, Hori and Dhania. And Hori initially is a small peasant, he has a small tract of land, and he is surrounded from all sides by economic sharks and bureaucrats and village bureaucrats, and there is nobody who will side with him in anything. Peasants are fighting among themselves, they are petty, they are jealous. Hori also can be sometimes jealous and petty, but then he is at the receiving end of the exploitative system that exists in the country at that time. So you have Hori, and you have his wife, you have his family, he has daughters, he has a son, and as the novel progresses, you realize that this person at the economic level and the social level is fighting a losing battle, and it is moving inexorably. You can't control it. You can't really turn the tide. You can't really turn the direction of the novel is taking. The novel is inexorably moving, in the direction of tragedy. It's a tragedy that cannot be avoided, which means that the writer is not writing the novel about Hori and Dhania, about these characters. He is writing the novel about the formation, social formation to which these people will belong, and that social formation is the peasantry. Hori and Dhania don't seem to have any future. Their present is all the time, tricky. Their present is very difficult to bear with, to persist with. And their past, one doesn't know whether it was glorious or not, but then Hori always thinks back of his past as something which was stable. One doesn't know whether the past of the peasantry in the 1920s and 30s was stable, whether the 19th century was a very good period for the peasants to look back to. Premchand is not saying that at all. But so far as Hori's mind is concerned, Hori's approach is concerned, he thinks that the past was good. So the past was good, the present is bad, and there is no future. And then things unfold like this. One thing leads to another. There is a kind of determinism in the novel, even though Premchand is giving a lot of liberty to different characters to fend for themselves and to do something in life. So there are some bright patches, but suddenly those bright patches also turn into some kind of grim thing. They become very dark and threatening, and that's what the novel is. How does the novel end, and how did it begin? It begins with Hori's wish to die, at a time when he is able to give a gift of a cow to the Pandit, because he has this very strange, notion that if you gift a cow to a Pandit, then you will straight away go to salvation or moksha. And he wants to attempt Godan, that is giving a dan, a kind of donation to a Brahmin, and that the cow will be able to take him across the river of life, and then he will reach his idea of paradise. Can he do so? Can he get a cow ever? He has a cow in the beginning. He snatches it from his. He entices somebody, in the village, in the next village, to part with his cow, and Hori is enjoying, the milk of the cow and his family also for some time, etc. But then finally he has to leave it, and his food is becoming less. He has all kinds of problems. His son doesn't agree with him. He runs away, and one thing leads to another, and finally Hori's land is taken away from him, and he's turned into a landless agricultural laborer. His wife is all the time with him. She is watching him, die minute by minute, and in the last page of the novel, Hori finally dies, and Hori's wife then says that he cannot gift a cow to the Brahmin, so she calls a Brahmin, and she gives him 20 annas. 20 annas would be around more than a rupee and a quarter today, and she says that she has saved this money in the previous year. She was keeping them in some corner, this money, and she has this is the only money she has, and she gives that money to the Brahmin and says, this is his Godan. But that's not Godan at all. That's just 20 annas. That is only one rupee and a quarter. So where has the novel taken us? It has taken us to a peasant who ceases to be a peasant. It has taken us to a point where the peasant has no other option but to die, and die a death which is tragic, which is helpless. This is what the novel seems to suggest. Now, another interpretation can be given to this novel, and that will be, with the help of, putting it in the context of the 1930s. In the 1930s, people realize that perhaps even Gandhian path will not take them anywhere, because Gandhian path, would be the path where the industrialists would come, will form a very, very useful social unit. They will be the trustees of the economic system, and then they will create conditions in which all Indians will be able to breathe easy, will be fed and clothed properly, and given shelter. But Premchand, in his heart of hearts, as a writer, looking at India the way it is unfolding itself, would realize that this kind of a situation is an illusion. So the words that he used for Kayakalp, that it's a asadhya sadhana, it's maya swapna, and it's arthanad. It's impossible and can't happen. It's an illusion and it's not real, and that it will end up in tragedy. All these three words seem to be squeezed into the message, if at all one can call it a message, into the intent and the crux of Godan. And if Godan ends like this, then Premchand seems to have, as a writer, lost hope in the circumstances as they exist. And yet, Premchand is not a novelist of hopelessness. Premchand has his own kind of intellectual, ideological grit. He has that kind of a stamina. This novel took almost 400 pages to reach this end. And at the end, the woman is angry. Hori is dead. Hori, of course, has to die. But then his wife is there, and his wife is not crying. His wife is standing up with the head held high, and she says to the Brahmin, as if she is reprimanding him, she is scolding him. She says, "Take this money. I have only this money to give you, and I'll give this to you." So this kind of a defiance, in tone, that suggests that everything is not over. The peasant husband is dead, but his wife is still there, and the wife will carry the struggle forward. There doesn't seem to be any hope, but Premchand very clearly decides to end the novel with the assertion of a woman. And who knows, maybe the women of India in the 1930s and 40s, they will come forward, they will look towards the future, and then they will be able to give answers that will satisfy partly the requirements of the day. Now, friends, this is the greatest novel that Premchand wrote, and it took all the earlier novels, that it carried the essence of all the earlier novels, and it can be easily said that his last novel is his best novel, and that always there has been some kind of a growth upwards, and Premchand is getting bigger and bigger as a writer, in his fiction, and he was born to write novels. And as I said in the previous lecture, he is called by the critics the Upanyas Samrat, the king of the novel, and this is quite true today. In the 20th century, in the 21st century, as we live, we realize that Premchand still is the greatest writer that Hindi produced, and he is rated as high in India as the greatest novelist in other languages. So this is what one has to say. Premchand literally died in harness. He died while working. The moment he had finished Godan and it was published, he saw the copy, and then immediately he started writing another novel, and that novel was Mangal Sutra. That novel he could write only 16 pages, printed pages. I've read those pages, and in this novel he starts the plot with 3 or 4 sons of an old man, plotting against their father. And what they say is that the father is not parting with money, he is not helping them at all, and he has a lot of property. So they should perhaps declare him, insane, and they can grab his property. So they are planning that way, and see the kind of stark situation in which the novel begins. One wonders where it would have reached. Premchand was lucky to have, a son. He had 2 sons. He was lucky to have a son who was a writer himself, Amrit Rai. And Amrit Rai thought that he would be able to carry this novel forward. Amrit Rai himself was a novelist later, and he thought that he would be able to, write this novel through on behalf of Premchand. He also perhaps wrote the novel and published it, but this didn't carry conviction with the audience. And I have not seen this novel anywhere. I would like to buy and read it if it's available. But then this novel remains incomplete. And this is also a kind of metaphor, for us, that the writer died in harness, and he was writing a novel, and he would have continued if he had lived. And Premchand didn't live a very long life. Premchand was born in 1880. He died in 1936. So he was just 56 years old. He had, in the meantime, toyed with the idea of writing film scripts so that he could get some easy money and get back and invest it into presses. Premchand, I'll discuss this thing in the next lecture as to what Premchand did apart from writing novels. And so far as his writing is concerned, I would say that these novels today offer to us a picture that is not available in the books of history or in the books of sociology. So Premchand today is important, valuable for other reasons also, not for entertainment as he was at the time when he wrote, but for education, for knowing about what India was, also for telling us today that the kind of situations we have today, those situations existed then also, and they didn't have an answer. And our job as readers of literature, as readers of Premchand, is to find answers to the questions that Premchand raised in his novels, and his novels suggest the answers, but generally raise the questions squarely. So with this, I end the discussion. Viewers, I hope you would be able to see these points in your own context and apply your minds to them and evolve a kind of understanding that will sort out issues. Thank you.